with Buns Out and their adjusted strategy to deal with COVID, and sort of crisis management, if I can call it that. It seems very clearly that you've adopted a very customer-centric approach. And with everything that we're hearing and learning and understanding from the market on how brands are going to survive, which I think is the key word, right? It's all about surviving, not thriving at the moment. And the best way to do that is to create and adjust every strategy to understand that the customer's needs, their wants, their problems that need to be solved are definitely the ones that need to be at the top of the list.
Absolutely. I think during COVID times, customer-centric is especially important. You want to have that visibility, which I think customers would actually subconsciously, if not consciously, appreciate. They want to know that you didn't just kind of disappear during this time. What were you doing to stay in touch? What were you doing to keep things moving along? What were you doing to interact with them as much as possible? What were you doing to be positive in any way? And how did that help them? What were you doing for the community? What did you do during COVID that has showed that you didn't just kind of fold your arms and hope it was all just gonna pass by and that they'd always be there, and you've taken that for granted, and it was really at the end of the day just another business, and so you don't really have any need to do anything for anyone else, and it's really just each for their own. What efforts did you go out of your way to make in solidifying that strong relationship with not only your customers, but with humanizing your brand as much as possible? And I think that that's such a vital thing, that anyone in any kind of business, if they are kind of experiencing these times and not sure what to do or haven't already been doing it, would be a great place to really focus, but also do so genuinely and authentically. And I think it makes it very easy for customers to feel like, okay, that's definitely what I'm going to keep supporting, where I'm going to keep going to. And the best things have been great work on X, or I love that you guys have just done X. And I can't wait for all of this to be over, because as soon as it is, you'll be the first restaurant that I go to. And so when that happens, it's definitely mission accomplished.
And I love that, Maps. I think I just want to take it to a bit of a different area now. You mentioned that a lot of people are having different expectations of what is it that you have been doing all of this time in lockdown. And I've been seeing a lot of things on your social media. You are very active over there. And I know you've been doing quite a lot of things with the Sia Khaleesi Foundation, for instance. So, I mean, a person of your profile, there is kind of an expectation of you to serve in a way, because you do have the platform that you have. So, I mean, how do you go about with what charities it is that you're going to be associated with, who it is you want to help? I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of offers on your desk, nonstop messages and emails of, come through and help out here and there. How is it that you choose not only what aligns in your brand, but, with the views you have in South Africa today and where you are now? What is it that you could give from yourself to others, and how do you pick it?
So what I'm going to say next, I'm going to really need you to focus on letting me finish the sentence. But there's a huge focus. Sorry, there's a huge expectation on helping and assisting. But that huge expectation is myself putting it on myself. I don't worry about excuse me, I don't worry about anyone else's expectations of that, because I think it should be something that we inherently, no matter who you are in society, if there's any kind of way possible that you're able to assist those who are in a less fortunate position, then I think it should be our responsibility. It's what we should do. And in these kinds of times, we should be more compassionate and as kind as ever, and as willing to reach out and go and actually seek out each and every kind of place that might need any assistance that we can offer. Just because I just think we should, it shouldn't ever be needing to be pressured to do that. As soon as you're pressured to do that, then you shouldn't do it at all. So I think it's an expectation I've always had on myself. I have worked with numerous organizations. I run a children's home with a few people. I've got my own foundation as well as my own organization around bursaries called bursarynetwork.com. And we are an organization that provide bursaries to students who have difficulties getting access to tertiary education, but funding for tertiary education. And we kind of try and fill that gap. But it's a sort of crowdfunding platform. I don't know where that Scottish accent was going to come. It's quite crowdfunding platform. I think it's the hat, maybe. Crowdfunding platform. And, we've been very lucky and successful with that, with having had quite a bit of support. And over the last 3 years, we've managed to put 25 students through university. And it's something that, I plan on growing in an even bigger way, and work with other great organizations like the Smile Foundation, who do wonderful work for children who are born with birth defects that prevent them from being able to smile. So you're looking at things like mainly cleft palates that make it difficult for them. And they do wonderful work to actually enable these operations to happen so that they can obviously then allow them to have a full smile, because it's also quite a mean world out there, and it's something that people will never look away from. And it's important that you're able to assist them as young as possible, so that their mouths can also adjust to this and grow with their mouths, and the nerves can immediately meet their mouths or their lips to be able to function as best as possible. And there's numerous other organizations, and it's always a case of what is a need that firstly resonates with me more than anything else. But in this case, it should be something where we all would have thought, this is what's happening, this is where I am, and this is how I'm able to deal with it. I'm so lucky that I'm not someone who is in some really unfortunate position where they are living hand to mouth, and they probably have a day of savings, if any at all, and they literally are just kind of trying to do as much as they can to survive on a typical, or during a typical period, so not even with COVID around. And so right now, how am I able to even survive when you're telling me I have to lock down? It's very clear. If people haven't realized it by now, then it's obviously very worrying, but it's very clear that lockdown in itself is a major privilege.
Absolutely.
Able to lock down for a while and have food that we can have last us at least a week, so that we can stay indoors for as long as possible and only do our weekly shop when we need to, and we have the space to be locked down and not be exposed to the outside world, whatever it might be. But people are living these cramped conditions in unfortunate circumstances where they won't be able to get any work for a long time, because it's freelance piece jobs, as we refer to them in South Africa. Whatever piece of work that you can give me is what I'll have to survive for the day, or for a couple of days, or at most a week. And people have just been suffering in a horrible, horrible way. And it was something that, together with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Kolisi Foundation, the Mbumba Foundation, as well as my foundation, Keza Mutaun Junior Foundation, where we all wanted to figure out how we could be able to help as much as possible. And so we all kind of combined our resources and networks and started embarking on reaching as many communities as we could across the country to be able to feed them, because that is the overarching most important thing. We've been seeing now reports of hospitals for the first time in decades getting young people come in, and kids and babies come in for malnutrition and starvation, where they're having more cases of that than ever, because people just don't have any way of looking after their families. Heard horrible stories and, seen so many horrible things of people starving and the emotional roller coaster that's come with it all. And, there was a story of a father who was a car guard, and now he's not able to do that for a while because there weren't any cars to guard at the time. Obviously now there's a few more cars on the road, and he says it was so tough to even survive the first week with his kids, that by the start of the second week, they asked him, when are we going to eat again? And he just kept crying himself to sleep. And so what he did one of the nights, that was one of the most painful things that he did, was to put some water in a pot, start boiling that water, and kind of pretend to the kids that he'd gotten some food, and pretend he was cooking something, but it was just boiling water. And he did it long enough until they kind of passed out and fell asleep just from hunger, and then woke up again and kind of repeated that cycle when he'd go out and look for some food and everything. And if he managed to get some, he managed. If not, he would kind of tell them that he will try to get it again. And it's those kinds of stories that make you really want to reach out as much as possible. And Tehilah, for me, it's always about what is the most important thing kind of right now in what people need to survive. And that's what my focus has been during COVID times. Apart from that, it's always been focusing on my passions, things that align to me, things that I'm passionate on wanting to know more about and know a lot about, and figure out that can be gaps that we need to close to improve society. So youth and education are my two biggest passions and focuses. So it's always about developing the youth from a very early age and educating them, and everything else are crises that I try and be a part of to alleviate the strain as much as possible for families that are struggling.
Now, Maps, there was quite a few things that you said there that I wanted to pick up on, starting all the way back from you saying that you do things because it's what you want to do, and the pressure that you put comes from yourself as opposed to any external factors. But unfortunately, the world we live in, social media plays a very big role in the impressions and the pressures that are placed on particularly youth, particularly not even just youth, but I think their group is the most susceptible to those pressures. Now, in your position with the experience you have, how do you advise young people that are looking at Instagram? And let's be honest, regardless of our socioeconomics, most children in some way or form have access to a network or an outlet or a conversation or a group of friends that inevitably would put pressure on them, whether that pressure is, what is on their dinner table to what the kids on Instagram are wearing. There is a lot of pressure that comes from social media. So my first part of the question is, how do you manage social pressure from social media, if at all, or negativity rather? Because I think someone with your profile, as loved as you are, I'd imagine there's a little bit of negative at some point along the way. So how do you manage that? And then the flip side of that question is, what advice do you have for kids that are experiencing social pressure through things like social media networks or groups of friends or the environments around them?
So I think personally, I just try and ensure that I am as real as possible in my portrayal of myself and my life. And I speak about both the positives and the negatives of it all. I think it's an easy thing to realize that what people speak about generally is a perfectly curated, snapshot images album of their lives. And I always try and, as much as we kind of subconsciously do that, I always try and make it as real as possible so that people can feel like this is a authentic representation of what you're actually experiencing. And with that, you take away a lot of the heavy pressures that come with what people would expect of you to do in your position. And so then you start to work against the grain of what everyone else is doing that is not serving society at all, if we're honest. And you are trying to show as much of a realistic image of what it's like to I guess be in your position, but also to be in your line of work and to have the experiences that you're having. So I always, one of the biggest things for me was a few years ago, getting to a point where I actually realized that it was liberating to be able to not have the want or need or feeling of obligation to have to impress anyone else. And as soon as you're able to let go of that, everything else kind of starts to be a whole lot easier and fall into place. And there's no pressure to have to do this and do it this way because this person did it and look at their life. I should be having that. And why am I not being as successful as them? And when you're able to start to focus on what works best for your life, you'll kind of realize how seamless it is to represent that. Because I find it so much more work to have to pretend to be someone else. Yeah. And I have my beliefs and I have the things that drive me and I have my set of morals, and I'll always be able to be as honest as possible about what I'm showing if I'm as honest as possible with myself when I'm doing that. And sometimes you have to think twice about what you're putting out there, how it might affect someone. And I think that's kind of the advice then that I would give to young people out there who are looking at social media, is to remember that it's a curation. And if they feel like seeing a series of posts from a person or certain people that is making them feel like it's impacting on their self-esteem and how they view themselves, be it their bodies, be it where they are going or what they're doing or how they should feel about themselves, then to kind of try and eliminate that as much as possible. Cut that negativity out and kind of try and find those people that resonate with a true representation of what you are wanting to really be. But first you have to realize that a lot of what you're seeing isn't the real world. A lot of what you're seeing aren't consecutive experiences of what they actually are experiencing. And even if they are experiencing that, more than likely it's been posed for you to like. Yeah. And think about what you want from social media. What do you want it to be? This negative, these negative platforms that are making you full of anxiety, feeling like you are lesser than, feeling like you haven't achieved anything, feeling like you're running out of time, whatever it might be? Or do you want to be filled with as much positivity as possible? So limit those interactions or cut them out completely by the people also that you're following, or give yourself those breaks. But get to a point where you realize that whatever you do, and this is one of those big realizations for me, is that whatever you do in life and the things that you are achieving, when it all comes crashing down, you experience that by yourself, right? And so all those people who are, I think about it for me, all those people who are wanting to be around you and are telling you to do this and to do that, when you slip up or something goes wrong, you crash and burn in that experience by yourself, and everyone disappears. Yeah. So once you start to realize that you are only responsible for yourself in that regard, then you kind of start to realize that you need to be able to ensure then that you live for yourself and stop trying to impress everyone else. Because there is actually absolutely no point whatsoever. It's a bit long-winded, I know, but I hope that...
No, it's exactly it, because I think that question of social media is one that can go on forever, because it's something that I'm particularly passionate about, because social media does play a huge role in your life, in Tehilah's life, in my life, in terms of how we manage and grow our businesses, to how we share parts of our lives. 20 years ago, it was a completely different story, but now you can't ignore the role it plays in your life and how it governs things like the shirt you put on, to the dress you put on, to, you hear kids, and I've heard it with kids that are younger, or, oh, I'm going to wear that because it'll photograph well for Instagram. Not, I'm going to wear that because that's what I want to wear today. And you forget how much influence, for lack of a better word, that those platforms have now owned. I mean, restaurants are designing spaces for social media. Hotels are positioning themselves as Instagram friendly, you know. I mean, Giraffe Manor, as you know, which is a hotel that I'm determined to get you to very soon. He said like their hotel took off because it launched at the perfect time when Instagram travel became a thing. And without Instagram, that hotel brand would have developed and grown very differently. And it's so important. It has amazing power, social media, to grow brands and build audiences and get people together, mobilize people for good and bad causes.
And so on that, the most wonderful thing you can do for yourself on social media, especially if you're wanting to build that following and be able to use it positively, because, you know, what we focused on a little bit earlier was more the negative side. So positively is if you can find that thing that you are passionate about or that you represent or that you create, and you focus on that and you start to build yourself as being the authority on that thing, then you start to build this loyal following focused on that, and you can build momentum of something that actually stands for something as a whole. And that will always be what will have the longevity, as opposed to a lot of, you know, just the noise of everyone trying to do the same thing, all go to the same place and pose in the same way and have, you know, different ways of trying to get as many likes as possible. But a lot of the time, people will always back those people who kind of get that popularity and fame from being themselves as much as
authenticity.
Possible.
Yeah. It is. It's authenticity and staying true to who you really are and what your brand is by the end of the day.
Yeah, and not to bang too much on that word in particular, but especially in a time of COVID-19, it's been such a great cleansing period, because now you're able to see what people's real lives are like.
And that's been amazing. That has been
amazing.
Incredible.
Exactly.
Because you take away the fancy hotels and you take away the so-called unboxings and you take away the fluff and the trims, and you stuck with influencers or personalities that put out a very artificial, which is totally fine, you know, each to their own. But the lessons that they are giving off through that sort of smokes and mirrors environment, particularly to younger people that are very active on these networks, COVID is completely stripped away. It's kind of really just come in and leveled all of us to actually, this is my house, this is my kitchen, this is the clothes that I have when I don't get borrowed clothes. And I mean, I'm 100% guilty of the same thing. You know, it's easy to go to an event and you look amazing because wonderful brands have said, oh, Hazy, do you mind wearing this to this? And you think, great, like fantastic. But most people out there, and this is where I think, like you said, that authenticity comes in. You need to own the fact that, yeah, I look great and I love wearing this dress, but it's kindly been loaned to me by X, Y, and Z, as opposed to my wardrobe's fantastic, but you'll never see this again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a whole sequin closet I walk through daily.
Exactly.
But what we're seeing because of those pressures are people who've actually bought items from said place are saying, ooh, I love this package I just got from Louis Vuitton. And they've just bought it at Louis Vuitton, but now they're saying it's something that's being delivered, or something that they've bought in the past and they're just unboxing the same each time, and they're like, ooh, wouldn't you love to see what's in it? And then they kind of like, you know, so there's all these pressures to have to be getting these things constantly that you end up just living a lie. And so what this cleansing period I'm referring to, it ends up really exposing people to, okay, what do you like really? What are you really thinking? How do you live at home? What are your thoughts on certain things? What's your sense of humor like? What do you do for fun? How are you staying sane during this period? How are you helping me stay sane during this period? People are loving that. How have we helped other people stay sane and have you know, different conversations? How are you really showing me that you are worth backing and following? And also with everything that's happening around the world right now, where do you stand on this or that? And then I know where I stand with you. So it's been really an interesting time to for people to be able to start to really distinguish, and in many cases start to slowly break down the celebrity. so to speak, and the influencer who perhaps doesn't have much substance.
Yeah.
Therefore, why am I following
Not
them?
everything is perfect.
Yeah.
But exactly, not everything is
Yeah.
perfect. But also, even those people they've got their market too. Some people really just want those people who don't have substance, and they just follow them because they look pretty, and that's it, and that makes them feel better. So each to their own once again. But you're really starting to see you're able to see a lot of the truth during COVID-19, and that's what I was appreciating. But that's what I've been appreciating during this period.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there has been, some serious stepping stones. You went live for the first time ever during COVID-19. You've never done that before. I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, I went live for the first time on social media, any social media platform during COVID-19. And I think in the end now, I've probably gone live like 30 times, maybe.
Yeah, my phone would say the same. I almost had to, mute you for a little bit. every 2 days, Maps is live, and I was always like, I'll see it in a bit. Okay, well, I mean, Maps, I think it's fair to say we are quite an international panel here, having a bit of a chat, with all the different accents and time zones going on. And I mean, we all love to travel, if anyone really follow any of our pages. So, I mean, do you feel, a bit of cabin fever? Where's, the first place you want to be traveling to the second the borders do reopen?
So, actually not so much. I kind of realized how much of of an introvert I was, or am. And B, I was really grateful because I'm on the road so much. I've been really grateful to finally be home and enjoy my home for more than 3 or 4 days, and really kind of get to see it in a different way, and immerse myself in it as much as possible, and add more kind of love and energy to it. And when I was really glad that I'd managed to make it a space that felt like home, that was almost like, it almost felt like because I renovated it about a year ago, and it almost felt like this beautifying bunker creation before the times that were coming, and it's something that as a result has felt like it's been pretty uplifting and motivating, despite its kind of size of space. And so I'm honestly in no rush to get going. But as soon as the borders open again, if we're talking international borders, obviously, I think the first place I'd probably want to go to.
You can come visit me.
The first place I probably want to go to is Dubai.
Yay!
You know what? Dubai is actually a really good one because there is a lot happening right now there already. They've somehow managed to keep cases down to a minimal and reopen despite despite everything that's been happening, and despite being such a great port that people stop on their way to their destinations. They've managed to keep it down significantly. And there's very few places like that right now. I mean, immediately my mind kind of goes to New York or Barcelona or places like that. But I'm kind of happy not being there for a while. I think I'll just kind of make time pass. So then you start thinking places that haven't been overly exposed. And Dubai is one of them. And so is Japan, actually, oddly enough, is another place that hasn't been overly exposed despite being in Asia. And Japan for me is the most one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's definitely out of South Africa, out of home, is my favorite country to go to.
Oh, I would second that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. I mean, to eventually travel and go eat your weight in sushi after all of this wouldn't be the worst. Wouldn't be the worst way to.
You were just in Japan though for the World Cup just before.
Yes, but so I've made this deal with myself. The first time I went to Japan was about 3 years ago, and I after that experience decided I have to go back every single year. So since I was a little kid, I've always been obsessed with Japan. It was actually it was the second language I learned to count to 10 in before English, oddly enough. And I always built up this expectation of it over the years. And I used to love things like anime. And then as I got older, fell in love with their design and their kind of social aspect and their architecture and thinking and food and I always wanted to go. And I only went from that point when I was about 6 or 7, actually 5 or 6, I only ended up going 20 years later. And when I got there, obviously the expectations are massive. And I'm like, I'm actually now worried that I've built up such massive expectations for this place. And it absolutely obliterated my expectations. It's just whatever you think. Yeah, it's an amazing place. And there's
I've heard so many people say that, like, this is how a country must work. It's just everything just works, and it's
I have to second you, Maps, on that. It was just everything you thought you were going to get on the other end. It was 10 times. The thing that I always take away is when you go up and down escalators or lifts in Japan, you could literally draw a line from the person at the top to the person at the bottom, and they are in a perfectly straight, like the spacing between them is perfect. And I remember turning back and looking at that and going, yeah, they get it right. They do. They get it right. Yeah.
And to be fair, that kind of description would kind of insinuate that they are quite robotic, perhaps don't have much freedom, but it's actually, it's the contrary. There is personality there. They're so warm and welcoming, and if you're a foreigner and you seem a little bit lost and you ask, they want to help even though they can hardly speak English, a lot of them, and you just love that. And being someone who's not from there, when you get there, all you see is kind of Japanese everywhere, but you're still able to use and engage with everything around you just because they just make it, it just works. It all just makes sense.
Yeah, it all just works.
There's literally no negative about Japan at all, besides one thing, is that they just work too hard, the Japanese. And so their one downer as a community, as a culture, as a society, is that the most prevalent case of Japanese people being perhaps unhappy or depressed or leading to certain extremes is something that they call overwork. It actually has a term, it's called overwork, where people just work and grind too hard. They're all hard workers and therefore never give themselves a break, or sometimes never given a break. But it's part of their culture. Whatever they do, they want to do it to the best of their ability, and you appreciate every small interaction as such. And it's definitely something worth admiring.
Well, the only other negative I'd add to that is the $40 per piece of asparagus tempura we had at one of these very overrated restaurants.
We could complain about that.
Hard to overlook the fact that it's probably one of the most expensive places.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
But you can do it smart and make it quite affordable, but it isn't particularly cheap. That's why you can kind of only go once in a while.
Maps, we can't thank you enough for your time and letting us pick your brain. Yes, that's it. You were fantastic.
Do you want to keep going?
I'm here all night. I'm here all night. But
anything else that, surely there's got to be more. I've been watching this documentary on babies. So, if you want to know about babies, I can tell you that. Let's go.
Yes, that Netflix documentary.
Do you want to come practice what you've learned? Because I've got a real life that you can come practice everything you've learned.
I'm closer, Zahirah. Get in line.
Yeah, you can go next door and then you can come to me after.
Starting there, actually.
He does. I hire him for babysitting duties all the time.
Oh, that's good to know. You can add that to your Dubai to-do list. How's that? Try your hand at a toddler, see how you go.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome talking to you both as always. And well done on this wonderful platform for people to be able to kind of see how we're all surviving out there. And hopefully whoever's watching this feels somehow encouraged or motivated to think of what they can do best for themselves or their businesses. So good luck, and I'd say just keep the faith. Be willing to adapt. I think that's one of the main things. Be willing to adapt and think of the ways that you continue to do that. You have to adapt to these times to survive. Don't sit back or rest on your laurels or just hope that people will come afterwards. Ask as much as possible. Ask for help. There are many different ways of being able to get that, both in a business sense and both mentally, if that's a struggle. You know, I mentioned a few times that one of the biggest things that we're all struggling with right now is a fear of the unknown. And for a lot of people, it's still hovering, that unknown of whether your business will manage to survive, whether you'll still have your job. And if you haven't kind of gone and started working again, and you've managed to leave your home a bit more often, whether you'll lose your mind from having cabin fever. But I think things are easing a little bit more. Sadly, South Africa is about to still endure a wave and a big peak of coronavirus cases. But we're sadly in that predicament where, as the most unequal country in the world, you don't really have a choice, because it starts to be a thing that needs to happen, or you'll have more people dying of starvation and an economy that gets set back for a number of years as opposed to a number of months. And it's a horrible thing to think of it as a trade-off, but how do you try make both work? And how do you make people actually realize that it's actually going to get to a point where, until we have a vaccine, as many people as possible are going to get it anyway, if we're all going to actually survive. So until we have a vaccine, we just have to all be responsible, all be smart, keep washing your hands, keep trying to isolate and quarantine yourself as much as possible, and limit your interactions with other people. Try and respect that as much as possible, because it's definitely on the up here, and it's best that we're not stupid about it. We want to get back out there and be able to live lives that we can sustain, but if we're stupid about it, then we're only going to make the problems worse. So stay safe, good luck, and love you both. Thank you.
Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you.